Vladimir Putin's plan to conquer Ukraine was originally thought to be largely dependent on the Russian Black Sea Fleet. But that fleet and its accompanying air wing have recently been battered by innovative Ukrainian missile and drone attacks, turning the once feared force into something of an afterthought in Europe's largest war in 7 decades. The Crimea-based fleet was at the epicenter of the action when Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February, launching caliber cruise missiles at military and civilian targets deep inside the region, blocking access to the nation's ports and threatening an amphibious landing on Odessa. Since those early days, Kyiv has taken the lead as mystery explosions and missile attacks have inflicted havoc on the Russian fleet, losing 3 ships. This includes its flagship cruiser, the Moskva, and decimating its Crimea-based air wing in a dramatic attack this month. Although the Black Sea Fleet has the power to keep the small Ukrainian navy at bay, the Russian navy has never been particularly proud of it. The Kremlin's Northern Fleet, which is headquartered in Severomorsk, is by far its largest and most advanced unit. Before the Russian invasion, the Northern Fleet had dispatched some of its ships to aid. However, the navy stationed in Crimea was anticipated to play a significant role in holding Ukrainian forces in the south to repel a predicted amphibious assault that never happened while fortifying the captured peninsula. While Russian submarines occasionally fire into Ukraine, the fleet hasn't lived up to the standards set at the beginning of the war and has instead adopted a defensive posture, either in port or deep offshore, to fend off Ukrainian attack. The Black Sea Fleet has been plagued with issues since the spring due to subpar management, outdated equipment, and hubris that the Ukrainians have been too eager to take advantage of. The fleet commander, Admiral Igor Osipov, was fired as a result of a series of military disasters. The resistance has been fierce. Ukraine's domestically developed Neptune anti-ship missile, which sank the Moskva, and Harpoon missiles donated by Denmark that sank a Russian resupply ship this spring, have forced the fleet to stay well offshore and out of the fight for months. Alexander Turchinov, the man who launched the Neptune project and served as Ukraine's interim president, as well as its former Secretary of National Security and Defense, told Politico that he was impressed with the missile hit. According to Turchinov, a Neptune missile also hit the Admiral Essen-class frigate in April. Due to the gap between launches, Russia was able to intercept the second missile that was aimed at the ship. Ukraine took that as a lesson. Firing 2 missiles simultaneously when attacking the Moskva was a bad idea. They managed to sink the target after getting past the air defenses, Turchinov claimed. Russian forces are far more exposed than they realized they were before the war, both on land and at sea. In addition to the cruiser Moskva being at the bottom of the Black Sea, days of Ukrainian drone and missile strikes on the strategically important Snake Island, 22 miles off the southwest coast of Ukraine, in May and June, damaged and sank several smaller landing and transport ships docked there by the Russians. The attacks also destroyed several contemporary air defense and radar equipment, effectively eliminating Russian control over the sea and air, and giving Kyiv back control of a strategically important piece of land. Russian ships at sea were made even more exposed to Ukrainian attacks by the Russian fleet's evacuation of Snake Island, which demonstrated that the Russian fleet had no defense against Ukrainian strikes. According to Rob Lee, a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute who monitors the forces of Russia and Ukraine, the losses to Russian amphibious ships are potentially more critical than the Moskva. The losses made it more difficult for Russia to transport troops and equipment around Crimea by sea, and they've increased its reluctance to employ the cutting-edge landing ships that had moved from the Northern and Baltic fleets immediately before the war. The reluctance to use its ships as a fighting force means the fleet has been rendered virtually impotent and hasn't been a thing for several months, a second DoD official told Politico. The Russian Black Sea Fleet is shattered and is currently primarily used as a defensive force with sporadic cruise missile strikes. Russia's choices for a campaign in southern Ukraine are severely constrained by keeping the fleet far out at sea. The fleet itself still has over 30 ships at sea or in port, but their effectiveness and maneuverability has been severely hindered since Moskva's air defenses and the radar screen provided by Snake Island were taken out. The fleet is made up of small missile-laden corvettes and frigates, landing craft, and 6 submarines. The Western official observed that the Russian fleet is not doing anything. Snake Island provided them with a little more freedom, and now that freedom has been taken away from them. Their tactical capabilities would be further diminished if they lost it. The Aviation Regiment of the Black Sea Fleet, stationed at Saki Air Base in Crimea, was also severely damaged last month during an airstrike night that destroyed around half of the unit's planes. A drone is alleged to have attacked the fleet's command center twice, once in July and once a few weeks ago, in the port city of Sevastopol. Putin has taken note of the attacks as well as the media attention they've gotten in the West. State media in Russia reported on the senior admiral of the Black Sea Fleet being replaced, a nearly unheard of action by a government that places a high value on the appearance of strength and expertise despite contradicting evidence. The dismissal of the admiral likely resulted from inadequate planning, apparent carelessness, and a general lackadaisical attitude of the Black Sea Fleet. They didn't seem to adjust their operational procedures after a drone attack on the Black Fleet headquarters in Sevastopol, Crimea, during the celebration of Russia Navy Day, which resulted in a second drone hit on the structure this month. Overall, the fleet's commanders failed to adapt and exposed the structural weaknesses in the fleet in terms of training, professionalism, adherence to safety standards, and ability to adapt since the start of the war. The Russian war effort has been weighed down by the same failures since the beginning, when elite forces and heavily armored units were repelled in their initial haphazard advance toward Kyiv, and again when troops were driven out of Bucha and Irpin in the north, where they failed to hold on to early victories. Poor communications encryption has also resulted in almost regular attacks on Russian command and control and headquarters locations, which have led to the deaths of senior officials including generals. Military analysts were astounded in recent weeks by the Russian determination to store ammunition in large depots close to the front lines, into which the Ukrainians have fired precision rockets and artillery shells from the United States, turning the dumps into balls of fire night after night. The combat has in some respects been stopped as a result of Ukrainian attacks on what could be considered immovable targets on land and at sea, according to the Western diplomat. After 6 months of battle, the Russians and their crippled command and logistical structures have thwarted the Kremlin's initial plans to wage a brief, decisive war. Instead of moving and making an impact on the battlefield and in the Black Sea, they seem to be only attempting to minimize losses. According to an assertion made by Ukraine last week, Putin's prized Black Sea Fleet is down to just 7 ships. Even though no media outlet has been able to independently confirm the information provided by Ukraine, it's clear that the fleet has suffered significant casualties since the conflict started in February, including the loss of its flagship ship, the Moskva, in April. Alright guys, that's all for today. Let us know your thoughts on the current state of Russia's Black Sea Fleet in the comments section below. Please give us a thumbs up, turn on the notifications, and hit the subscribe button for more.